It is 1:35. Welcome back. This is Three Man Front as we are wrapping up our campus tour. We're at UAB today. Thanks to Coach Trent Dilfer for hosting us here on site. We were able to watch practice this morning and able to have a long discussion with not only Coach Dilfer but Coach Russ. And now we're joined by the offensive coordinator of UAB, Alex Mortensen. Coach, welcome to the program. Thanks.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You missed in the introduction the guy who taught Nick Saban everything he knows.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Were you ever on the other end of one of those nice butt chewings by Coach Saban?
Of course I was. Yeah, I think anyone that worked there at some point you had one or multiple. But when I got there as a graduate assistant coach, and the way he did the GA, so I'm an offensive GA. I work with the quarterbacks and I work with the receivers some. But I'm in the quarterback meetings. I'm with those guys all the time. But when you get to the season, I'd go through meetings with the quarterbacks, with the coordinator, and then we would go to the field, and I'd be with them in individual. But then when we got to scouted periods, his philosophy was the GAs should trade. So I would go to the defensive field, so I'm coaching the offensive scout team, and I'm coaching offensive players. And so, well, guess who else is over there? Coach Saban just so happens to be on the defensive field. So, yeah, so I certainly got, if things weren't right over there, he's going to hold you accountable for that in his way, and which was great. It was a great experience to see him coach and teach, and I've certainly have some fun stories from that too. And then he gave me a pretty good one in youth camp one year.
Youth camp.
So, which he coached youth camp like it was a Super Bowl. I mean, he really put a lot of effort into it. And this is like 14 and under. Did a great job coaching these kids. Like he really did, and it was awesome to see. But there's like 1,200 kids usually at youth camp, and one of the periods is we would do a 2-on-2, receivers versus DBs drill, and it was sometimes it was 3-on-2 depending on what coverage they're playing. Well, I want to do a good job for Coach Saban. I want to do a good job for the camp. So my whole thing was like, hey, keep the tempo of the drill running fast.
Right.
And so I'm helping organize the offensive side. So I'm getting it going as fast as I can. I am paying no attention to the defense. None. And then he turns around and accuses me of calling out-breaking routes when they're playing inside leverage man. And I'm like, Coach, of course I didn't say this, but I'm like, I have no idea what you're in on defense over there right now. This is 13-year-old youth camp. But he got after me pretty good then, too. So that was one of the funnier ones. I will say, and I apologize for getting a little long-winded, but
you're good.
A year later, same part of camp. So now I'm paying attention. And I'm doing the opposite. I find out the defense is playing inside leverage man technique, so I'm running in breaking routes, making it as hard for the offense as I can. And then when they change the leverage, I'm running out breaking routes. And so I asked Derek Ansley one time, I said, hey, what are you guys in here? Because I lost track. And Coach Saban looked at me. He goes, why do you care what we're in? I said, Coach, I want to make sure we're not throwing out breaking routes in a blitz coverage. And he got the biggest smirk on his face, and he chuckled a little bit. And I said, "Okay, he remembers." So he had a good sense of humor about it. But yeah, there were plenty of those.
You got fall camp number 3 for you officially here at UAB. I'm not going to ask you to compare to the previous 2 seasons, but this group in particular, what do you like so far?
Love the intangibles of the group first. I feel like they're a lot of selfless guys, a lot of team guys, and a very hard-working group. That their practice effort's been really good, and so that would be the thing I really like. And I think every team is going through this challenge right now with the transfer portal of adding a lot of new guys to your team quickly. And I think you're trying to get them caught up on scheme and technique and your verbiage and all those things, but there's also this other thing of how quickly can you create chemistry and bond and play for each other and become a team and become one. And so that to me is, again, we haven't played a game. We haven't faced real adversity yet, so let's not count our chickens before they hatch in that regard. But right now that part feels really good to me. That's been my favorite part.
How do you feel about your QB1? Put up some great numbers last year. How has his fall camp been so far? You like his progression?
Really like Jalen Kitna's progression a lot. Jalen came to us and actually had not played a lot of football. Had not played football in a while, and then even then had not played a lot of college football. And so, he kind of got thrust out there in the middle of the season, and, I think, he was had some highs, made some, spectacular plays, and also had some lows too. But I think his playing experience has really served him well and helped him, and he's learned from that. And he's a very talented guy. He's got a live arm. He's a student of the game. He's got some. For a long guy, he's got some fast twitch, some quick twitch qualities. So we were really pleased with him, and and looking forward to getting into a game week and really honing on a game plan. But he's done a really good job.
Has he naturally become, organically, I guess, a vocal team leader?
I think to a degree he has naturally, and but he kind of does it his own way. He's not, he's not an angry guy. He's not a I think he's able to have tough conversations when he needs to have them, but he's more of a guy that I think his teammates like him. I think they're drawn to him. I think he'll go have a side conversation with them if they need to fix something, and all these quarterbacks, the great quarterbacks, they're all have different personalities, and I think he's kind of found his own way to do that. I really do.
In regards to, we talked to a couple of your offensive weapons this year. In regards to your running back, so you feel very good about what you have in that offensive line built behind him?
Yeah, we really do. Like the offensive line a lot. It's been, that's a position group that we added, a variety of guys over the course of May and through the summer, and so we've been trying to get them up to speed. One, trying to teach them and help them develop in our system, and then two, figure out, okay, what's the best combination of, maybe it's not 5, maybe it is, maybe we do play 6 or 7,
right?
And then where do they need to play, left or right, inside or outside? So that's been a challenge to try to accelerate, putting that puzzle together. But we really like the guys. Again, when you asked me earlier what we like about this team, guys being hardworking, selfless, tough, I think about that group that way. I really do. And they've been really positive, in their approach to work. So I'm really optimistic about, the offensive line from that standpoint and the leadership we can have there.
You're replacing talent, some speedsters from last year, the wide receiving core,
yeah.
Guys that can make plays, and we saw it. You got some guys coming back. What does that particular room look like? What do you like about the wide receiver group this season?
Well, I think you did hit the nail on the head. I mean, a lot of these guys do need to go prove it in a game, right? And they need to go play in games and compete in games. But I do think we have good movement skills. I do think we have some guys that can run in there. So you mentioned losing some speed. I think we do have some speed. I think we've recruited some. I think we've had some here that we've developed that's been on campus for some time. And then we've got some guys that have really good short space quickness that you get the ball in their hand or you get them in a short area. They're tough to get down or tough to cover. So I think the room's got a good mix of it's kind of like putting a basketball team together sometimes, we're not real big, but we do have some bigger, thicker, stronger guys that can do some of those things. We've got some guys that can stretch the field vertically, and we got some guys that play really good in a short area. So I think the room is pretty well-rounded, I guess is the best way I could say it.
In regards to how this game has changed since you have been a GA to where you are now in your career, is it just amazing to look at how much the defensive schemes have changed and what you have to do to change yourself in regards to the way that you design your offense?
Yeah, I think, the game obviously changes, evolves. Some people would say it's even cyclical, because you have trends.
Right.
People adapt and then trends come back. And, it probably is a little bit different. And I would say even go back to when I was in college, it's really changed a lot. When, if you looked, a lot of people played in two receivers in the game at a time, and people didn't spread out as much, and people didn't play at the line of scrimmage and no huddle as much. So the pre-snap operation has changed, and then the post-snap style of play is different. And I think, it's interesting you asked about when I was a GA. I GA'd in 2014 was my first year at Alabama, and we were kind of going through a transition where, we were going to change philosophically a little bit. And, at that time, Coach Saban was moving the offense to play a little faster and play a little more spread out and move the tight end around a little more and do some different things. And then, he was also in a conference where, you had Manziel for a couple of years. Auburn had, was fast. And so, Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss. So, you watched him adapt his defense as well in terms of recruitment, body type, scheme. So, some of that stuff has been going on for, a decade or so, some of those things. But that being said, there is a little bit of a pendulum that can swing because it swings over here. Defenses get lighter and faster. You have to ask yourself, are there some advantages to putting 2 tight ends on the field and running downhill and getting under center and having actions off of those things that people don't see regularly as much. And there's usually on offense, there's an advantage sometimes to being different, right? You play one of these triple option teams, you don't practice against it all the time. It's different, right? And so, you've got to play to the strengths of your team first and foremost. But I think anytime you can play to the strengths of your team, be sound, be creative, but be a little bit different than everybody. So I guess as you see the trends, you got to ask yourself, will the pendulum swing back a little bit at some point?
Right. UAB offensive coordinator Alex Mortensen joining us here on Three-Man Front on the Higginbotham Hotline. Got to ask you this. I don't know if you saw it. You've probably been so dialed in. But an offensive coordinator for Hugh Freeze made some comments the other day about the play calling, who was assigned to what duties. I am not asking you to step in it here. But as far as people who have influence on calls, it's you. It's a collaboration. Obviously, the offensive coordinator, Coach Dilfer, he's got an idea schematically, philosophically, what he wants to do. But as far as calling plays, is it you for 3 downs? I know that you guys confer on certain downs, or is it by association or by committee?
We've been here 2 seasons, and we've done it differently at different times. That's maybe something Coach Dilfer would want to talk about more. I mean, but it has, we've collaborated. There's been times I've done it, or long stretches where I've done it, and then he's had oversight, and he'll step in and say, hey, let's use a gadget here. I think you got to think play pass here, where I'll take the lead. And then there's been times, where he's called the games too. So we've done over 2 years, we've done both, and we've, talked a lot this offseason about how do we get the best of both of us. What does that look like? And I think, the calling of the game is one thing, and I do believe it's important. I think, how you call a game is important. There's no question. I tend to think Monday through Friday is more important, in terms of the preparation, the planning, what are we going to do? And then a lot of times, if you prepared properly, a lot of your calls are kind of, predestined to some extent, and you always reserve the right to change it based on feel of the game. The opponent adjusts. Maybe there's a matchup that's going better than you thought, maybe one that isn't going so well. But a lot of it, I think, the best systems I've been around, a lot of it is done during the week. And so I think us trying to figure out, okay, how do we have the best process Monday through Friday to prepare for the game and put a plan together is really even more important than game day.
What's the cutoff point for getting a play in? What with time on the clock, you say, hey, I want to run rip zip laser, and he says, no, let's go ground and pound left.
Right.
When do you guys? When's the cutoff point? Do you have a natural time on the clock?
Yeah. Well, the times when I've taken the lead, he kind of just lets me go, and then as quickly as he can, he'll chime in and say, think about this, or he'll try to get to me between a series. And say, hey, you ought to think about slipping this in at some point. Here's what I'm seeing. When he's taking the lead, then a lot of times I would rather maybe interject in between a series as well. So sometimes there's not a lot of deliberation. And, you go back Bill Walsh, who's a famous, head coach of the 49ers that won the Super Bowls. They did he was famous for his opening script, and they used to script, I think 12, and it eventually became 20, 25 plays where you'd plan your openers and you kind of stay on them until you get to a third down or until you get to the red zone, you get into a special situation. And so that's a way to do it too. So a lot of times when you've really planned well and you've scouted your opponent well, you've kind of, like I said, you've kind of already done it. So there's not a lot of deliberation on the headset about what the next call is. You kind of know what you're going to, You know what we're going to run first play against Alabama State already? I don't know that.
That is Alex Mortensen, the offensive corner at UAB. Coach, great to talk to you. Great to have you come by and spend
You're a
some
great
time with
storyteller, by the way.
I don't know if I'm a great storyteller.
No,
but
you are.
There are some good stories out there from those years.
I hope you'll come back.
Love that. Love to come back anytime.
All right.
So,
thanks, Coach.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Coach. More from UAB football. This is Jock's Three-Man Front.